Oop-a-boo, boop-a-doo, yappa-doop-a-da-boo, boop-a-doo-bee, scabba-da-boo. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading homework. What? What is he talking about? Well, I would say homework over saying a book for little children, little still, you know. So, welcome to doing homework with Stonesy, where I was told to read this book and write about it, and I don't like writing, so I'm gonna read. Today we are reading the book, The Little Prince. It's only 83 pages. It's a picture book, which means it's only 60 pages to my eyes. So please, if you want to listen to this audio, please have the book in front of you, for you will not make any sense of the pictures shown. Maybe I'll do funny voices, maybe I won't. Depends on my mood. So, without further ado, let's begin. We're not reading to Leon Worth. We are not reading Translator's Note. Let's start this. Chapter 1. Once when I was 6, I saw a magnificent picture in the book of the jungle called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing a wild beast. Here's a copy of the picture. In the book it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing. Afterward, they are no longer able to move, and they sleep during 6 months of their digestion. In those days, I thought a lot about jungle adventures and eventually managed to make my first drawing. Using this colored pencil, my drawing number 1 looked like this. I showed the grown-ups my masterpiece, and I asked them if my drawing had scared them. They answered, why be scared of a hat? My drawing was not a picture of a hat, it was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. When I drew the inside of the boa constrictor, grown-ups would understand. They always needed explanations. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups advised me to put away my drawings of boa constrictors outside or inside and apply myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That's why I abandoned, at the age of 6, a magnificent career as an artist. But I had been discouraged by the failure of my drawing number 1 and had been drawing number 2. Grown-ups had never understood anything by themselves. It was exhausting for children to have to provide explanations over and over again. So then I had to choose another career, and then I learned pilot airplanes. I have flown almost everywhere in the world, and as a matter of fact, geography has been a big help to me. I could tell China from Arizona at first glance, which is very useful if you get lost during the night. So I have had, in the course of my life, lots of encounters with lots of serious people. I have spent lots of time with grown-ups. I have seen them at close range with not much approved opinion of them. Whenever I encountered a grown-up who seemed to be all enlightened, I would experiment on him with my drawing number 1, which I always kept, but I wanted to see if he really understood anything. But he always answered, that's a hat. Then I wouldn't talk about boa constrictors or jungles or stars. I would put myself on the level and talk about bridge and golf and politics and neckties. And my grown-up was glad to know as much a reasonable person. Chapter 2. So I lived all alone without anyone I could really talk to, until I had to make a crash landing in the Sahara Desert 6 years ago. Something in my plane's engine had broken, and since I had neither a mechanic nor passengers on the plane with me, I had been preparing to undertake a difficult repair job by myself. For me, it was a matter of life or death. I had only enough drinking water for 8 days. The first night, then, I went to sleep in the sand 1,000 miles from any inhabited country. I was more isolated than a man shipwrecked on the raft in the middle of the ocean. So you can imagine my surprise when I was awakened at daybreak by a funny little voice saying, please, draw me a shape. What? Draw me a shape. I leaped as if I had been struck by lightning. I rubbed my eyes hard and I stared. I saw an extraordinary little fellow staring back at us very seriously. Here's the best portrait I could manage to make him. Later on, but of course, my drawing is much less attractive than my model. It's not my fault. My career as a painter was discouraged at the age of 6 by grown-ups, and I never learned how to draw anything except boa constrictors, outside and inside. So I stared wide-eyed at the apparition. Don't forget that I was about 1,000 miles from any inhabited territory, yet this little fellow seemed to be neither lost nor dying of exhaustion, hunger, or thirst, nor did he seem scared to death. There was nothing in appearance that suggested the child was lost in the middle of the desert 1,000 miles from any inhabited territory. Then I finally managed to speak. I asked him, but what are you doing here? Then he repeated very slowly and very seriously, please, draw me a shape. In a face of overpowering mystery, you don't dare disobey. Absurd as it seemed, 1,000 miles from all inhabited regions in danger of death, I took a scrap of paper and pen out of the pocket. Then I remembered that I was mostly studied geography, history, and arithmetic and grammar, and I told the little fellow, rather crossly, that I hadn't know how to draw. He replied, that doesn't matter. Draw me a sheep. Since I had never drawn a sheep, I made him one of The only two drawings I knew how to make. The one of the boa constrictor from outside, and I was answered the hear the yellow fellow answer, "No, I don't want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. A boa constrictor is very dangerous, and an elephant would get in the way. Where I live, everything's very small. I need a sheep. Draw me a sheep." So then I made a drawing. He looked at it carefully and then said, "No, this one's already quite sick. Make another." I made another drawing. My friend gave me a kind, indulgent smile. "You can see for yourself. That's not a sheep. It's a ram. It has horns." So I made a third drawing, but it just rejected the others. "This one's too old. I want a sheep that'll live a long time." So then, impatiently, since I was in a hurry to start working on my engine, I scribbled this drawing and added, "This is just a crate to keep the sheep you want inside it." But I was amazed to see my young critic's face light up. "That's just the kind I wanted. Do you want the sheep that... You think the sheep will need a lot of grass?" "Why?" "Because where I live, everything's very small." There's sure to be enough. I've given you a very small sheep." He then bent over the drawing. "Not so small as that. Look, he's gone to sleep." And that's how I made an acquaintance of the Little Prince. Chapter 3. It took me a long time to understand where he came from. The Little Prince, who asked me so many questions, never seemed to hear the ones I asked him. It was things he said quite random that bit by bit explained everything. For instance, he first caught sight of my airplane. I won't draw my airplane. That would be too complicated for me. He asked, "What's that thing over there?" "It's not a thing, it flies. It's an airplane, my airplane." And I was proud to tell him I could fly. And he exclaimed, "What? You fell out of the sky?" "Yes," I said modestly. "Oh, that's funny," said the little prince, broke into a lovely peal of laughter, which annoyed me a good deal. I like my misfortune to be taken seriously. Then he added, "So you fell out of the sky too. What planet are you from?" That was when I had the first clue to the mystery of his presence, and I questioned him sharply, "Do you come from another planet?" But he made no answer. He shook his head a little while staring at my airplane. "Of course, that couldn't have brought you very far." And he fell into the reverie of the last long while. Then, while taking my sheep out of his pocket, he plunged into contemplation of his treasure. You can imagine how intrigued I was by his hint about other planets. I tried to learn more. "Where do you come from, little fellow? Where I live? Where is this where I live of yours? Where will you be taking my sheep?" After a thoughtful silence, he answered, "The good thing about a crate that you've given me is that he can use it for a house after dark." "Of course. If you're good, I'll give you a rope to tie him up during the day, and stakes to tie him too." The proposition seemed to shock the little prince. "Tie him up? What a funny idea!" "But if you don't tie him up, he'll wander off somewhere and get lost." My friend burst out laughing. "Where could he go?" "Anywhere. Straight ahead." The little prince remarked quite seriously, "Even if he did, everything's so small where I live." And he added, perhaps just a little sadly, "Straight ahead, you can't go very far." That's just how I learned Chapter 4. That was how I learned a very important thing, which was the planet he came from was hardly bigger than a house. That couldn't surprise me much. I knew very well that except the huge planets like Earth, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, which have been given names, there are hundreds of others are sometimes so small that it's very difficult to see them through a telescope. When an astronomer discovers one of them, he gives it a number instead of a name. For instance, he would call it asteroid 325. I have serious reasons to believe that the prince came from an asteroid B612. This asteroid has been sighted once by a telescope in 1909 by a Turkish astronomer who had made a formal demonstration of the discovery by International Astronomical Congress. But no one had believed him on the account of the way he was dressed. Grown-ups are like that. Fortunately, the reputation of asteroid B612, a Turkish dictator, ordered his people to pain of death to wear European clothes. The astronomer repeated the demonstration in 1920 wearing a very elegant suit, and this time everyone believed him. If I've told you these details about asteroid B612, and I've given you this number on account of the grown-ups like numbers. When you tell them about a new friend, they never ask questions about what really matters. They never ask, what does his voice sound like? What games does he like best? Does he collect butterflies? They ask, how old is he? How many brothers does he have? How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only then do they know him. If you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums out of windows and doves on the roof. They won't be able to imagine such a house. You have to tell them, I saw a house worth 100,000 francs. And then they exclaim, what a pretty house. Little Prince on asteroid B612, if you have the picture. So if you tell them the proof of the little prince's existence is to be delightful that he laughed and he wanted a sheep. Then when someone wants a sheep, that proves he exists. They shrug their shoulders and treat you like a child, but if you tell them the planet he came from was asteroid B612, then they'll be convinced that they won't bother you with other questions. That's the way they are. You must not hold it against them. Children should be very understanding to grown-ups, but of course, those of us who understand life couldn't care less about numbers. I should have liked to begin my story with a fairy tale, but I would have have liked to say, once upon a time there was a little prince who lived on a planet hardly any bigger than he was, and who needed a friend. For those who understand life, that would sound much truer. The fact is, I don't want my book to be taken lightly. Telling these memories is so painful for me. It's already been 6 years since my friend went away, taking his sheep with him. If I try to describe him here, so I won't forget him. It's sad to forget a friend. Not everyone has a friend, and I might become like the grown-ups who are no longer interested in anything but numbers, which is still another reason why I've bought the box of paints and some pencils, which hard to go back to drawing at my age, when you've never made any attempts since the one of boa from inside and the one of the boa from outside, the age of 6. I'll certainly try to make my portraits as true to life as possible, but I'm not entirely sure of succeeding. One drawing works, and the next no longer bears any resemblance, and I'm a little off on his height, too. In this one, the little prince is too tall, and here he's too short, and I'm uncertain about the color of his suit. So I grope in one direction and another the best I can, and in the end I'm sure to be certain of more important details all wrong. But here you'll have to forgive me. My friend never explained anything. Perhaps he thought I was like himself, but I, unfortunately, cannot see a sheep through the sides of the crate. I may have a little like the grown-ups, but I have grown old. Chapter 5. Every day I'd learn something about the little prince's planet, about the departure, about his journey. I would become quite gradually in the course of his remarks, and just how I learned on the third day about the drama of the bobabs. This time, too, I had the sheep to thank, for suddenly the little prince asked me a question as if overcome by a grave doubt. Isn't it true that sheep eat bushes? Yes, that's right. Ah, I'm glad. I didn't understand why it was so important to the sheep eat bushes, but the little prince added, and therefore they ate baobabs too. I pointed out to the little prince that baobabs are not bushes, but trees are tall as churches, and that even if the whole herd of elephants pack of the planet, that herd wouldn't finish off a single baobab. The idea of the herd of elephants made the little prince laugh. We have a pile of them on top of one another. Then he observed precariously. Before they grow big, baobabs start out by being little. True enough. But why don't you want your sheep to eat little baobabs? He answered, oh, come on, as if we were talking about the same thing quite obvious, and I was forced to make great mental effort to understand the problem all by myself. And in fact, the little prince's planet, where we're as all on planets, good plants and bad plants. The good plants come from good seeds, and the bad plants came from bad seeds. But the seeds were invisible. They sleep in the secrecy of the ground until one of them decides to wake up and stretches and begins to sprout quite timidly at first, and charming, harmless little twig reaching toward the sun as a radish seed or a rosebush seed. You can let it sprout all it likes, but if the seed of a bad plant, you must pull the plant up right away, as soon as you can recognize it. As it happens, before were terrible seeds in the little prince's planet. Baobab seeds, the plant's soil is infested with them. Now if you tend to the baobab too late, you can never get rid of it again. It overgrows the whole planet. Its roots pierce right through, and if the planet is too small and there's not too many baobabs, they can make it burst into pieces. It's a question of discipline, the little princess told me later on. When you finish washing and dressing each morning, you tend to your planet. You must be sure you pull up all the baobabs regularly, as soon as you can tell them apart from the rose bushes, which they closely resemble when they're very young. It's a very tedious work, but very easy. But one day he advised me to do my best to make a beautiful drawing of the edification of the children where I live. If they travel someday, he told me, it would be useful to them. Sometimes there's no harm in postponing your work until later, but with baobabs, it's always a catastrophe. I know one planet that was inhabited by a lazy man. He had neglected 3 bushes. So following the little prince's instructions, I have drawn a planet. I don't know much assuming the tone of the molurist, but the danger of baobabs is so little recognized that the risk run by anyone who might get lost in the asteroid are so considerable that for once I make an exception for my inhabitable reserve. I say, children, watch out for baobabs. It's to warn my friends of the danger, which they, like myself, have long been aware that I worked so hard on this drawing. The lesson I'm teaching is worth the trouble. If you may be asking, why are there no drawings in the book of the tree big as the drawing of the baobabs? There's a simple answer. I tried, but I couldn't manage it. When I drew baobabs, I was inspired by the sense of urgency. Chapter 6. Oh, little prince, gradually this is how I came to understand your sad little life. For a long time, your only entertainment was the pleasure of sunsets. I learned this new detail this morning on the 4th day when you told me. I really like sunset. So, go look at one now. But we have to wait. What for? For the sun to set. The first, you seemed quite surprised, and then you laughed for yourself. And then you said to me, I think I'm still at home. Indeed, when it's noon in the United States, the sun, as everyone knows, is setting over France. If you could fly to France in 1 minute, you could watch the sunset. Unfortunately, France is much too far. But on your tiny planet, that's all you had to do was move your chair a few feet, and you would watch the twilight whenever you wanted to. One day I saw the sunset 44 times. And a little later you added, when you're feeling very sad, sunsets are wonderful. And on the day of the 44 times, are you feeling very sad? But the little prince didn't answer. Chapter 6. On the 5th day, thanks again to the sheep, another secret of the little prince's life was revealed to me. Abruptly, with no preamble, he asked me, as if it were the fruit of the problem, he long ponders in silence, if a sheep eats bushes, does it eat flowers too? A sheep eats whatever it finds. Even flowers that have thorns? Yes, even flowers that have thorns. Then what good are thorns? I don't know. At that moment, I was very busy trying to unscrew the bolt that was jammed in my engine. I was quite worried, for my plane crash was beginning to seem extremely serious, but the lack of drinking water made me fear the worst. What good are horns? The little prince never let go of the question once he had asked it. It was annoyed by a little jammed bolt, and I answered about thinking. Thorns are no good for anything. They're just the flower's way of being mean. Oh! But after silence, he lashed out at me with a sort of bitterness. I don't believe you. Flowers are weak. You're naive. They reassure themselves that whatever they can, they believe their thorns are making them frightening. I made no answers. At this moment, I was thinking, if this bolt stays jammed, I'll knock it off with a hammer. Again, the little prince disturbed my reflection. Then you think flowers? No, not at all. I don't think anything. I just said whatever came into my head. I'm busy here with something serious. He stared at me, astounded. Something serious? He saw me holding my hammer, fingers black with grease, bending over an object he regarded as very ugly. You talk like a grown-ups. It made me a little ashamed, but he added mercilessly, you confuse everything. You got them all mixed up. He was really very annoyed. He tossed his golden curls in the wind. I know a planet is inhabited by a red-faced gentleman. He's never smelled a flower. He's never looked at a star. He's never loved anyone. He's never done anything except add numbers. And all day long, he says over and over, just like you, I'm a serious man, and puffs him up with pride. But he's not a man at all. He's a mushroom. He's a what? A mushroom. The little prince was now quite pale with rage. For millions of years, flowers have been producing thorns. For millions of years, sheep have been eating them all the same. And it's not serious trying to understand why flowers go to such trouble to produce thorns. That's good for nothing. No, it's not important. The war between sheep and the flowers is no more serious and more important than the numbers of the fat red gentlemen added up. Suppose I happen to know a unique flower, one that exists nowhere in the world except on my planet. One that a little sheep can white out in a single bite in one morning. Just like that, without even realizing what he's doing. That isn't important. His face turned red now, and he went on. If someone loves a flower which just one example exists among all the millions and millions of stars, that's enough to make him happy. And then he looks at the stars, he tells himself, my flower, somewhere. And if the sheep leaves the flowers, then for him it's as if suddenly all the flowers went out. That isn't important. He couldn't say another word. All of a sudden, he burst out sobbing. Boo-hoo-hoo. Night had fallen. I dropped my tools, and what I did care about my hammer, about my bolt, about thirst and death, there was one star. One on a planet, on mine, the earth, the little prince to be consoled. I took him in my arms. I rocked him. I told him, the flower you love is not in danger. I'll show you a muzzle for your sheep. I'll draw you a fence for your flower. I didn't know what to say. How clumsy I felt. I didn't know how to reach him, where to find him. This is so mysterious. The land of tears. Chapter 7. I soon learned about the flower better. On the little prince's planet, there had always been little examples of flowers decorated in a single row of petals, so that they took up the room at all and got in no one's way. They would appear one morning in the grass and would fade by nightfall. But this one had grown from a seed brought from who knows where, and the little prince and any others, it might be some kind of new baobab. And it was a sprout soon, stopped growing, and then began to show signs of blossoming. The little prince, who had watched the development of the enormous bud, realized it was some sort of miraculous apparition of the emerged from it. And the flower continued the beauty preparations in the shelter of green chamber, selecting her colors with the greatest care and dressing quite deliberately, adjusting her petals one by one. So she had no desire to emerge all rumpled like the poppies. She wished to appear only in the full radiance of her beauty. Oh yes, this is quite vain. In her serious adornment she lasted days and days, and one morning, precisely at sunrise, she showed herself. And after that laboring so painstakingly, she yawned and said, I'm hardly awake. Forgive me. I'm all untidy. But the little prince couldn't contain his admiration. How lovely you are. Aren't I? The flower answered sweetly. And I was born the same time as the sun. The little prince realized that she wasn't way too modest, but she was so dazzling. I believe it is breakfast time, she had soon added. Would you be so kind as to tend to me? And the little prince, utterly abashed, had gone to look at the watering can, served the flower. She had soon begun tormenting him with rather touched vanity. One day, for instance, alluding to her thorn, she remarked to the little prince, I am ready for tigers, and with all their claws. There are no tigers on my planet, the little prince had objected. And besides, tigers don't eat weeds. I am not a weed, the flower sweetly replied. Forgive me. I am not afraid of tigers, but I have an odor of dress. You wouldn't happen to have a screen? A heart of drafts? That's not a good sign for a plant, the little prince had observed. How complicated a flower is. And after dark you'll put me under a glass. Wait. And how cold it is where you live. Quite uncomfortable. Where I come from. But she suddenly broke off. She had come here as a seed. She couldn't have known anything in other worlds. She made it by having let herself be caught on the verge of so naive of a lie. She coughed 2 or 3 times in order to put the little prince in the wrong. That screen? I was going to look for one, but you were speaking to me. Then she made herself cough again in order to inflict a twinge of remorse on him all the same. So the little prince, despite all the goodwill of his love, had soon come to mistrust her. She had taken seriously certain inconsequential remarks and had grown very unhappy. I shouldn't have listened to her, he confided to me one day. You must never listen to flowers. You must look at them and smell them. Mine perfumed my planet. But I don't know how to enjoy that. The business about tiger claws, instead of annoying me, ought to have moved me. Then he confided further. In those days, I didn't understand anything. I should have judged her according to her actions, not her words. She perfumed my planet and lit it up with my life. I should never have run away. I'd have realized tenderness underlying her silly pretensions. Flowers are so contradictory, but I was too young to know how to love her. What a funny and cute little love it is, the little prince. And as such, that's the end of that. We get to end mid-page like we normally do, because we can do this all day and play Scooby-Doo. I don't know. I'm looking for a bookmark, because my normal bookmark's in my other book. I'm going to use this picture of Wario I have. Wario! Yeah, that's a very cute story. And with that, today we read pages 01 to 25, chapters 1 to 8, and skadoosh. Oh, sorry, skadoosh. Let me go up a little bit, because I need my copy-paste check mark. Here we are, the little prince. Kaboom. Tomorrow we are reading next time we'll be reading pages. Wrong thing. Very confusing. 25 to 40 and chapters 6 to 14. What's the here, friends? Well, the is when I type this in. 6 to 1, that doesn't make sense. Chapter 6 to 14, baby. So yeah, next time we will be reading chapter 6 to 14 or pages 25 to 40. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please like, be vision, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.